What happens when a man's prejudice meets a woman's power? At New York's JFK Airport, Airline's manager, Richard Covington, singled out a black woman, Dr. Ivy Easton, publicly humiliating her and branding her a security threat over a simple carry-on bag. He thought he was asserting his authority. He had no idea he was about to trigger a full-scale airport lockdown, not to contain her, but to clear the way for her. This isn't just a story of mistaken identity. It's a real-time account of how one man's bitter racism collided with a level of clearance he couldn't comprehend, leading to a career-ending catastrophe that echoed from the departure gate to the highest levels of national security. Stay with us as we unpack how one snap judgment led to an international incident. The air in JFK's Terminal 4 was its usual chaotic symphony. A cacophony of rolling luggage wheels, multilingual announcements, and the low hum of thousands of intersecting journeys. It was a place of managed chaos, a system of human logistics refined over decades. For most, it was a transient space, a necessary purgatory before the feast-on-om of the skies. For Richard Covington Station, manager for Aerovista Airlines, it was his kingdom, a kingdom he felt was perpetually under siege. Richard, a man whose tailored suit was always just a little too tight across the shoulders, stood near gate B32, his jaw clenched. Another delay this time, a maintenance issue on the flight to London. He'd already fielded 3 complaints from first-class passengers who seemed to believe he personally machined the turbine blades. His tie felt like a noose, and his performance metrics for the quarter were trending downward. He needed a win. He needed control. His eyes scanned the bustling gate area, not seeing passengers, but potential problems. Liabilities. That's when he saw her. Dr. Ivy Easton was an island of calm in the terminal's turbulent sea. She stood in the boarding line for Aerovista Flight 112 to Geneva, a non-stop service she'd taken a dozen times. She wasn't dressed to impress a boardroom. She was dressed for a 9-hour flight. She wore comfortable tailored black travel pants, a soft cashmere sweater, and practical yet elegant flats. Her hair was styled in intricate micro-braids that cascaded over her shoulders. Beside her was a standard regulation-sized roll-aboard suitcase and a leather satchel that held her laptop and research papers. She was reading an article on her phone, her expression one of serene focus. To Richard Covington, she was a nail sticking up, waiting for a hammer. His mind, soured by stress and curdled with a lifetime of unexamined biases, didn't see a calm professional. He saw a target. He saw someone who didn't fit the profile of his usual first-class clientele for the Geneva route. The bankers, the diplomats, the old money families. He strode over his shoes, clicking with an aggressive purpose on the polished floor. He bypassed the gate agent, a young woman named Chloe, who was already scanning passports. He planted himself in front of Dr. Easton, his body language a wall of unearned authority. "Ma'am." He began, his voice loud enough for those nearby to turn their heads. "I'm going to have to ask you to check that roller bag." Ivy looked up from her phone, her brow furrowing slightly. "I'm sorry." "Your bag," he said, pointing a dismissive finger at her suitcase. "It's too large for the overhead compartment. It will have to be checked." Ivy glanced at her bag, then at the sizer bracket next to the counter, which her bag would have easily fit. She'd flown with this exact suitcase for years. "I assure you it's a standard carry-on. I fly this route often. It always fits." Her voice was calm, reasonable. But Richard didn't hear reason. He heard a challenge, "I'm the station manager, ma'am," he said, puffing out his chest. "I decide what's standard and what isn't. The flight is completely full, and we need to make room. You'll have to check it." "I understand that flights can be full," Ivy replied, maintaining her composure. "But my ticket includes priority boarding and a guaranteed carry-on spot. More importantly, my research materials and prototypes are in that bag. They are fragile and cannot be checked." The word prototypes hung in the air. For a moment, Richard could have pivoted. He could have asked a clarifying question, but his prejudice had already written the script. A black woman talking about prototypes. To him, it sounded like a flimsy, made-up excuse to get her way. "Ma'am, everyone thinks their luggage is important," he sneered, a condescending smile playing on his lips. "I can't make exceptions for you. It's a matter of policy." "Chloe." The gate agent shifted uncomfortably. She knew the woman was right. The bag was fine, and her first-class ticket absolutely guaranteed her the space. She started to open her mouth to intervene. "Sir." "She's in 2A. She has—" Richard shot her a look that could freeze fire. "I will handle this, Chloe." He turned back to Ivy. "Now, are you going to comply, or are we going to have a problem?" The line had ground to a halt. Passengers were staring openly now, some with annoyance, others with dawning unease. A young man, a few people back, a tech developer named Ben Carter, instinctively unlocked his phone, his thumb hovering over the video record button. He'd seen this kind of corporate power trip before. Ivy took a slow, deliberate breath, her calmness a stark contrast to Richard's escalating agitation. "There is no problem, sir. There is only you choosing to create one. This bag is not being checked. It's staying with me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to board my flight." She made a slight move to step around him. That was the final trigger for Richard. His authority was being publicly flouted. His face flushed a deep, blotchy red. "That's it," he snapped, his voice rising to a near shout. "You are being uncooperative and aggressive. Your tone is unacceptable." Ivy stopped, her eyes narrowing for the first time. "My tone, I have been nothing but respectful. You are the one who is being aggressive. Don't you dare twist this around," Richard seethed. He felt the eyes of the crowd, but instead of shaming him, they fueled his sense of righteous indignation. He was the manager. He was in charge. He took a half-step back and made the decision that would shatter his life. "I've had enough of this," he declared, his voice ringing through the gate area. "You are a potential security risk." A collective gasp went through the passengers. The words hung in the air, radioactive and vile. "Chloe." The gate agent's face went pale with shock. Ben Carter's thumb pressed down firmly, the red record icon glowing on his screen. Ivy stared at him, her serene composure finally cracking, not with fear, but with a cold, clear fury. "A what?" "You heard me," Richard said, high on his own power. He pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Covington at B-52. I have an unruly passenger, non-compliant, becoming aggressive. I'm declaring her a security threat. I need Port Authority police at my location immediately." He released the button, a smug look of finality on his face. He had won. He had invoked the magic words that stripped a person of all their rights in an airport. He looked at Dr. Ivy Easton, a black woman standing alone with her suitcase, and saw a problem he had just solved. He had no idea he had just pulled the pin on a grenade, and his hand was the only thing holding it. The real problem was just about to begin. The radio call acted like a stone tossed into the still waters of the gate area. sending ripples of alarm in every direction. The words security threat were a form of airport blasphemy, instantly transforming a simple boarding process into a scene of grave importance. Passengers who had been merely annoyed were now fearful, stepping back, creating a wide circle around Dr. Ivy Easton, as if she were contagious. Two Port Authority officers, a veteran named Miller and his younger partner, arrived within 90 seconds. They were professionals, their faces impassive, their movements economical. They assessed the scene. One agitated airline manager, one composed but clearly furious woman, and a crowd of onlookers. "What's the situation here?" Officer Miller asked, his voice calm but authoritative. He directed the question to Richard Covington, who had initiated the call. Richard swelled with importance. The cavalry had arrived to validate his judgment. "Officer, thank you for the prompt response." He began, adopting a tone of beleaguered heroism. "This passenger," he gestured at Ivy, "refused to follow standard airline baggage policy. When I insisted, she became belligerent and aggressive. Her refusal to comply with my instructions and her hostile demeanor led me to believe she poses a security risk to the aircraft and the other passengers." He laid it on thick, embellishing Ivy's calm responses into a narrative of unhinged rage. She was shouting, making a scene. It was very unsettling. Ben Carter, still recording from a discreet angle, scoffed quietly. It was a complete fabrication. The woman hadn't raised her voice once. Officer Miller looked at Ivy. His training taught him to read people, and the woman in front of him did not look like a belligerent threat. She looked like someone who had been profoundly insulted. "Ma'am, can I see your ID and your boarding pass, please?" he asked politely. Ivy met his gaze. She could see the procedural weariness in his eyes. He was just doing his job. Without a word, she opened her leather satchel, retrieved her passport and her first-class ticket, and handed them over. She made no sudden moves. "The manager is misrepresenting the situation." "Officer," she said, her voice steady and clear. "He took issue with my regulation-sized carry-on bag. I informed him that its contents are sensitive and cannot be checked. He escalated the situation. Not me." Miller glanced at the documents. "Dr. Ivy Easton, United States passport, first-class seat 2A. Everything was in perfect order. He looked at the bag in question. It was a standard Toomey rollerboard, the kind he saw hundreds of times a day. "Mr. Covington," Miller said, turning back to Richard. "This appears to be a customer service issue, not a police matter. This is a valid passenger with valid documents." Richard's face contorted. He was being second-guessed. "With all due respect, officer, you didn't see her behavior. People like her. They think the rules don't apply to them. I am the manager on duty. And I am telling you my professional judgment is that she is a threat. I want her removed from the gate." The phrase "people like her" was not lost on Officer Miller, nor on the surrounding passengers. It was a clumsy, transparent piece of bigotry. Miller's expression hardened slightly. "Your professional judgment has shut down this boarding gate and required a police response," Miller said, his tone cooling. "So let's all take a step back and calm down." But just as the situation seemed poised to de-escalate, something changed. A crackle came over Miller's own radio, a different kind of transmission. It wasn't the general dispatch channel. It was a clipped, urgent message on a secure frequency. "All units, JFK Command. Stand by for a priority update. Terminal 4 Delta Level Security Protocol being initiated. I repeat, Delta Level Protocol, effective immediately." Miller's partner's eyes went wide. Delta Level was not a drill. It wasn't for an unruly passenger or a suspicious package. It was reserved for high-level security events, typically involving threats to national security or the movement of extremely high-value individuals protected by the federal government. Richard Covington heard the transmission, and a smug grin spread across his face. He believed it was for him. His vigilance had clearly triggered a larger response. He thought they were taking his assessment of Dr. Easton to the next level. He felt a surge of vindication. He had been right all along. Then the world around them began to change. The cheerful, generic pop music playing over the terminal speakers cut out abruptly. It was replaced by a calm, authoritative voice, devoid of emotion. "Attention, all passengers and staff in Terminal 4. For your safety, all movement within the terminal is now restricted. All boarding and deplaning operations are suspended. Please remain in your current location and await further instructions." The announcement repeated in Spanish, then Mandarin. The terminal, once a river of motion, froze. Gates were sealed by airport staff. The moving walkways shuddered to a halt. A palpable tension far heavier than before descended upon the crowd. This was no longer about a luggage dispute. Richard looked around, a confused frown replacing his smugness. This seemed excessive. Then he saw them. Emerging from a secure access corridor near the customs area were 6 figures. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace that was utterly distinct from the police officers. They wore dark, impeccably tailored suits with earpieces discreetly coiled into their ears. They were not Port Authority. They were not NYPD. They were federal agents. Their eyes, hidden behind sunglasses, swept the area with practiced efficiency, missing nothing. They were led by a tall, stern-faced man with graying temples and an aura of absolute, unshakable authority. He held a tablet in one hand. As they approached Gate B32, the crowd parted for them instinctively. Richard Covington puffed out his chest, preparing to give his report to these obviously important officials. He was the man of the hour, the one who had spotted the danger. He stepped forward to intercept the lead agent. Sir Richard began. "I'm Richard Covington, the Aero Vista manager who made the call. The security threat is this woman right here." The lead agent, whose name was Donovan, didn't even break his stride. He walked past Richard as if he were a piece of furniture. His eyes locked on one person and one person only. He and his team came to a halt directly in front of Dr. Ivy Easton. Agent Donovan looked at Officer Miller and gave a curt nod of dismissal. "Officer, we have it from here." "Thank you." He then turned his full attention to Ivy. His severe expression softened, almost imperceptibly, with what looked like professional concern. "Dr. Easton," he said, his voice a low rumble of respect. "Agent Donovan, Diplomatic Security Service. We sincerely apologize for this delay. There was a communication breakdown with the local carrier." He gestured to his team. "We're here to escort you. The aircraft is being held, and we'll have you on your way momentarily." The entire gate area was silent enough to hear a pin drop. Every passenger, every employee. Officer Miller, Chloe, the gate agent, and a now frozen Richard Covington stared, their minds struggling to process the scene. Richard's brain felt like it had short-circuited. Dr. Easton Diplomatic Security Escort. The words didn't compute. He watched as one of Donovan's agents stepped forward, took the handle of the controversial roller bag with deferential care, while another relieved Ivy of her leather satchel. Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. He had to say something. He had to reassert his reality. "Wait. Hold on," he stammered, stepping forward again. His voice a desperate squeak. You don't understand. This woman, she was being hostile. I identified her as a security threat. Agent Donovan turned his head slowly, fixing Richard with a look so cold it could have caused frostbite. For the first time, he acknowledged his existence. Donovan said, his voice dangerously quiet. Mr. Covington, the station manager?" "Yes." "That's right," Richard said, a flicker of hope in his chest. Donovan's eyes narrowed into slits. "Mr. Covington, this woman is not a security threat. This woman is a guest of the United States Department of Defense traveling on State Department orders. Her work is a matter of urgent national importance. The prototypes in her bag, which you so flippantly dismissed, are valued at more than your entire airline's profit margin for this quarter." He took a step closer to Richard, his voice dropping even further, making it somehow more menacing. "What you are, Mr. Covington, is a man who has just interfered with a federally protected transport operation. You didn't identify a threat. You became one. Your little power trip has caused a diplomatic and security-level delay that is now being monitored by people you will never meet in buildings you will never enter. Now for the last time, step aside." Richard Covington froze, the blood draining from his face. He looked at Dr. Easton, who was watching him with an expression not of triumph, but of profound disappointment. He looked at the federal agents. He looked at the stunned faces of his own staff and the passengers. He saw Ben Carter's phone still pointed in his direction. The airport hadn't been locked down because of her. It had been locked down for her. As Agent Donovan and his team gracefully escorted a silent Dr. Ivy Easton through the now empty secured terminal toward her waiting plane, Richard Covington was left standing alone in the deafening silence of his own ruined world. The kingdom he thought he ruled had just revealed him to be nothing more than a court jester, and the joke was entirely on him. The departure of Dr. Easton and her federal escort did not return Gate B32 to normalcy. Instead, it left a vacuum, a crater of silent disbelief. The lockdown remained in effect for another 10 minutes a period, during which Richard Covington stood motionless, a statue of humiliation. The stares of the passengers felt like physical blows. Their earlier fear of Dr. Easton had morphed into a mixture of pity and contempt for him. When the all-clear announcement finally came, signaling the resumption of airport operations, the spell was broken. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones came out not to record, but to text, to post, to share what they had just witnessed. The story of the arrogant manager and the secret VIP was already spreading beyond the confines of the terminal, leaping into the digital ether at the speed of light. For Richard, the world began to move in slow, agonizing motion. His first instinct was denial. This was a mistake, a misunderstanding. The agents had been misinformed. He, Richard Covington, was the victim here. He had been following procedure. His first concrete thought was damage control. He turned to Chloe, the gate agent, his face a mask of false composure. "Chloe, I need you to file an incident report. Document the passenger's non-compliance from the beginning." Chloe looked at him, her youthful face, usually so eager to please, was now a portrait of disillusionment. The awe she once had for her boss had evaporated, replaced by a clear-eyed disdain. A report on her non-compliance. Richard, she asked her use of his first name, a small but significant act of rebellion. Or a report on how you racially profiled a government scientist and called federal agents on her. Richard recoiled, as if struck. That is an outrageous accusation. You will write the report as I dictate it. No. Chloe said, her voice shaking but firm. I won't. I'll write what I saw. and what I saw was a calm woman being harassed. Before Richard could respond, his corporate phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He looked at the screen. The caller ID read, Eleanor Bishop. A cold dread, far more potent than the authority he had tried to project, washed over him. Eleanor Bishop was the vice president of North American operations. She was based in the Chicago headquarters. She did not call station managers about luggage disputes. She was a legend within Aerovista, a shark in a Chanel suit who was rumored to eat corporate incompetence for breakfast. For her to be calling him personally at this hour could only mean one thing. The shockwave from his actions had already reached the highest echelons of the company. He fumbled with the phone, his hands slick with sweat. He walked a few feet away, trying to find a corner of privacy that no longer existed. Eleanor, he said, trying to make his voice sound confident and failing miserably. Richard Covington here. Richard, her voice was glacial, devoid of any warmth or preamble. I am in a conference call with our legal department and 2 gentlemen from the Department of Defense. I suggest you choose your next words with more care than you have demonstrated in the last hour. What in God's name happened at JFK? Eleanor, there was a situation, he stammered. A passenger was refusing to follow FAA-mandated baggage rules. She was belligerent. I made a judgment call based on security protocols. Stop, Eleanor, cut him off. Just stop talking. Do you know who Dr. Ivy Easton is? I've just been made aware she has some kind of government connection. Some kind of government connection. Eleanor's voice dripped with sarcasm. Richard Dr. Easton is the founder and CEO of Carbon Helix Dynamics. Her company has developed a carbon nanofiber composite that is revolutionizing stealth technology. It's lighter, stronger, and more radar-absorbent than anything that has ever existed. The prototypes in her bag were sample components for the next-generation F-38 fighter jet. She was flying to Geneva to a secure facility to meet with NATO's top aerospace engineers. Her transport was a coordinated multi-agency operation. Richard felt the floor drop out from under him. This wasn't just a VIP. This was a critical piece of the Western world's defense apparatus. I didn't know, he whispered. Of course you didn't know. Her identity is sensitive. That's the entire point. Eleanor's voice rose in controlled fury. But you didn't need to know her resume, Richard. You just needed to be a decent human being. You needed to not look at a black woman and immediately assume she's a problem to be managed. As if on cue, Eleanor's tone shifted. And now it seems the entire world is learning about it. Have you seen social media, Richard? What a young man named Ben Carter just posted a 4-minute video of your initial interaction with Dr. Easton. It's titled Aerovista Manager Racially Profiles Scientist Calls Her Threat at JFK. It's been retweeted by 2 very prominent tech journalists and a civil rights activist. It currently has 150,000 views and is climbing by the second. The hashtag #AerovistaShame is starting to trend. Richard felt a wave of nausea. He looked out at the sea of faces at the gate and saw the glint of dozens of phone screens. He was no longer a manager. He was content. Eleanor, I can explain. No, you can't, she said, her voice now flat and final. I want you in the station's administrative office in 10 minutes. Our New York regional director is on his way. Do not speak to any more passengers. Do not speak to any more of your staff. Do not leave the airport. Am I clear? Yes, Eleanor. He mumbled, his throat dry. The line went dead. He looked up and his eyes met Chloe's again. She held her own phone in her hand, and he could see the video playing on her screen. She didn't look at him with malice, but with a kind of sad finality. The walk from gate B32 to the administrative offices behind the ticketing counters was the longest walk of Richard Covington's life. The usual airport buzz now sounded like a roaring in his ears. Every person who glanced at him seemed to know. He felt as though a spotlight was following him, illuminating his failure. His crisp suit now felt like a shroud. The authority he had so desperately clung to had dissolved, leaving only a hollow shell of a man walking toward a reckoning he had single-handedly and so stupidly created for himself. He had wanted to be a king in his small kingdom, but in his blind arrogance, he had committed treason against a power far greater than he could have ever imagined. And judgment was coming. The walk from gate B32 to the administrative suite behind the ticketing counters was a journey through a hostile alien landscape that had only an hour before been his domain. The familiar hum of the terminal now sounded like a chorus of accusations. Every passenger who glanced his way seemed to be a judge and juror, their eyes following him with a mixture of morbid curiosity and contempt. Richard pulled at his collar, his crisp white shirt suddenly feeling damp and suffocating. His mind raced desperately, trying to build a fortress of justification around his actions. "This isn't my fault," he told himself, his steps quickening on the polished floor. I followed protocol. The passenger was non-compliant. The federal agents overreacted. This is a classic case of miscommunication. He was already rehearsing the speech, framing himself as a diligent manager caught in an unforeseeable bureaucratic storm. He was the victim here, a loyal soldier abandoned on the battlefield. He reached the frosted glass door of the admin office and pushed it open. The air inside was cool and unnervingly still. Frank Peterson, the regional director for the tri-state area, was already there. Frank was a company man to his bones, a veteran of 2 airline mergers and a dozen corporate restructurings. He was a survivor, and his primary skill was sensing which way the corporate winds were blowing. Today, those winds were a Category 5 hurricane, and Frank looked like a man clinging to a lamppost. He was pacing by a sad-looking ficus plant, refusing to make eye contact. "Rich Frank," said his voice, strained. "Sit down. Eleanor's patching in." Richard's sliver of hope that Frank might be an ally vanished. Frank's averted gaze and funereal tone told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't a disciplinary meeting, it was a sentencing. He sank into one of the stiff guest chairs, the ones he'd seen countless nervous employees sit in before him, the large monitor on the wall usually displaying flight status dashboards flickered to life. The Aerovista logo appeared, then resolved into the face of Eleanor Bishop. She was exactly as the corporate legends described her. Seated in a high-backed leather chair, with the glittering Chicago skyline framed perfectly behind her, she projected an aura of absolute, untouchable power. Her hair was immaculate, her expression severe, her eyes holding a piercing intelligence that seemed to see right through the monitor, through the drywall, and into the very core of Richard's pathetic self-justifications. "Richard." She began, her voice coming through the speakers with crystalline, chilling clarity. There was no preamble, no small talk. Frank is present to serve as the company's official witness. I am here to render a final disposition on this matter. But before I do, our bylaws require that I ask, is there anything, and I mean anything at all, you wish to say in your defense? This was it. His one chance. He sat up, straighter, clinging to the crumbling fortress of his own narrative. "Eleanor Frank." He began, trying to inject a tone of wronged professionalism into his voice. "I want to be clear. My actions at gate B32 were dictated by my training and by my primary responsibility as station manager to ensure the safety, security, and operational integrity of our flights. The passenger in question refused a direct instruction regarding baggage, a clear violation of policy. She became agitated. In a post-9/11 world, we are trained to take all such deviations from standard behavior seriously. I made a judgment call based on the information I had. The fact that this passenger had a hidden status is information that was withheld from me. I cannot be held accountable for reacting to a situation without the full intelligence picture. I acted in good faith to protect the airline. He finished, his heart pounding. It sounded plausible, he thought. It sounded professional. He had used all the right words: safety, integrity, protocol, good faith. Eleanor listened to his entire speech without a single flicker of expression. She let the silence hang in the room for a full 10 seconds. A silence that became heavier and more damning with each passing moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, precise, and utterly devastating. "Thank you, Richard. Let's deconstruct that statement. Shall we? I find it helpful to address these matters point by point." She looked down at a file on her desk, then her eyes locked back on his through the camera. "First, you cite operational integrity and timeliness. I have the logs for Flight 112 in front of me. The flight was fully boarded and ready for pushback 6 minutes ahead of schedule. Your intervention, Richard, resulted in a 47-minute ground delay, a full terminal lockdown, initiated by federal authorities responding to your call, a gate return for the aircraft, and a mandatory refiling of the international flight plan. So let's be clear, you were not protecting the operation. You were the disruption." Richard's mouth went dry. "Second," she continued, relentless, "you claim you were following protocol in response to a non-compliant passenger. Your gate agent, Chloe Daniels, an employee with a spotless record, has provided a sworn statement. She attests that Dr. Easton was calm, that her first-class ticket guaranteed her carry-on, and that her bag was regulation size. Daniels states that she attempted to advise you of this, but you silenced her. So this wasn't about enforcing airline policy. This was about you overriding policy to assert your personal authority. She's just a kid, she doesn't understand the pressure." Richard stammered, but Eleanor cut him off with a slice of her hand. "Third, and most critically, you claim you identified a security risk." Richard, the video of the incident, which as of 5 minutes ago has been viewed 2.3 million times, has been reviewed by our own security consultants as well as analysts from the Department of Defense. Their consensus is unanimous. They see a poised professional woman being systematically provoked and publicly humiliated by an agitated and unprofessional airline manager. They see you using loaded, biased language. They see you escalating, not de-escalating. The only security risk in that entire video, Richard, was you. The blood drained from his face. He felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. "And now let's talk about the consequences of your good faith actions," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. "Our marketing department projects the immediate financial fallout from the #AeroVistaShame campaign to be in excess of $10 million in lost bookings and brand damage. Our stock dip this morning wiped out $88 million in shareholder value. The Department of Defense has put our lucrative government travel contract under formal review. A NATO attaché called our CEO directly. All because of your judgment call." She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "But all of that, Richard, all of that is just business. It's damage we can, with time and money, eventually repair. The truly unforgivable part is why you did it. And we all know why. It's right there in the video for the world to see and hear. You looked at a decorated scientist, a CEO, a guest of our nation's government, a black woman, and you said, "People like you." She let the words hang in the air, a final damning indictment. That phrase, Richard, that's where your entire fortress of justification crumbles into dust. It reveals that every decision you made was not based on procedure or safety, but on a deep-seated, ugly prejudice. You weren't protecting the airline. You were indulging your own bias. And you did it while wearing our uniform, making your personal failing our global disgrace. She leaned back, her expression now one of cold finality. There is no defense for that. There are no mitigating circumstances. There is only the action and its consequence. Effective immediately, your employment with Aerovista Airlines is terminated for gross misconduct. The words, though expected, sucked the air from Richard's lungs. He slumped in his chair, a wave of nausea washing over him. "You're firing me," he whispered, the sound pathetic even to his own ears. "Oh, this is far more than a simple firing," Eleanor corrected him. "Frank has your termination paperwork, which includes a non-disclosure agreement we expect you to sign. You will be escorted from the premises. Your credentials have been deactivated. Your severance pension contributions and stock options are naturally forfeited under the gross misconduct clause of your employment contract." She paused as if for effect. "Furthermore, our legal team is currently calculating the full financial damages stemming from your actions. We are fully reserving our right to pursue a civil lawsuit against you personally to recoup those losses. And on a professional note, the airline industry is a very small, very tight-knit community. I've already spoken to my counterparts at United Delta and American this morning. Your name is now Radioactive Richard. You will not manage so much as a baggage cart at a regional airstrip in Alaska. You are done in this business. We will make sure of it." It was annihilation, a complete and total eradication of his professional life. Frank Peterson, with the practiced air of an undertaker, slid a thick folder across the desk. Sign on the last page. Rich. Richard stared at the papers, his vision blurring. He reached for the pen, but his hand was shaking so violently he could barely grasp it. As he struggled to scrawl, a pathetic imitation of his own signature, Eleanor Bishop delivered the final, most exquisite twist of the knife. "Frank," she said, her voice crisp and clear. "Once you have escorted Mr. Covington out, I need you to find Chloe Daniels. Tell her I was impressed by her integrity and her clear-headedness under pressure. I want to personally interview her for the now vacant station manager position. We need leaders who see valuable passengers, not imaginary threats." The monitor went dark, leaving Richard alone in the silent room with Frank and the ruins of his life. The corporate guillotine had fallen, and with chilling precision, it had severed him from everything he had ever been. The weeks following what the media dubbed the JFK incident were a study in divergent realities, a perfect illustration of how a single moment can send lives careening onto starkly different paths. For Dr. Ivy Easton, the ugly confrontation became an unforeseen fulcrum, leveraging her influence onto a global stage. For Richard Covington, life became a suffocating, silent free-fall. His termination was not the end of his humiliation. It was merely the beginning. The escort from the administrative offices was a masterclass in ignominy. 2 Port Authority officers, not Miller, but 2 stony-faced strangers led him not through a discreet staff exit, but on a long walk of shame through the bustling heart of Terminal 4. He kept his eyes fixed on the floor, but he could feel the gazes, hear the whispers. He saw a teenager grin and lift his phone, capturing a final pathetic image of the fallen king being exiled from his kingdom. The man who had weaponized security was now its subject, a non-entity being processed and removed. He went home to his meticulously clean apartment in Long Island City, a place he'd afforded on his manager's salary, and had always seen as a symbol of his ascent. Now the silence within its walls was a roaring accusation. For 15 years his life had been filled with the constant, purposeful hum of the airport. The roar of jet engines, the chime of boarding calls, the crackle of his radio. The quiet of his apartment felt like a tomb. That first night, he opened his laptop, driven by a morbid compulsion. He typed his own name into the search bar. The screen flooded with his digital ghost. Aerovista manager fired after viral video. Richard Covington's racist tirade. Who is the JFK manager? Who harassed a top scientist? There were think pieces, cable news segments, and endless looping gifs of his face contorted in a sneer as he spat the words, "People like you." He was no longer a person. He was a meme, a globally recognized avatar for petty tyranny and prejudice. He slammed the laptop shut, but the images were burned onto the inside of his eyelids. The job hunt began with a flicker of deluded optimism. He was an experienced aviation manager after all. He applied to other major airlines, to cargo carriers, to airport service companies. The responses when they came were swift and brutally uniform. Most were just silence. A few sent back polite automated rejections within hours, a clear sign that his name had been flagged by an HR algorithm. He could almost hear the corporate lawyers advising against touching him. Eleanor Bishop's promise that he was toxic was not a threat. It was a simple statement of fact. He lowered his sights. Logistics companies, warehouse management, corporate operations. The pattern repeated. An initial interest based on his resume, followed by a video interview request. Then the inevitable awkward silence when they matched his face to the viral villain. The polite but firm, "We've decided to move forward with other candidates." The digital ghost was inescapable. His savings, once a source of pride, began to hemorrhage. The formal, terrifying letter from Aerovista's legal counsel arrived, detailing their intent to hold him liable for damages approaching 7 figures. It was a threat designed to ensure he never spoke of the incident publicly, but it felt real enough to make him physically ill. He sold his apartment at a loss to cover his mounting debts and moved into a single stuffy room for rent in a run-down part of Brooklyn, a neighborhood he used to lock his car doors in while driving through. His collection of tailored suits, once his armor of authority, now hung in a cramped closet, mocking him with the memory of a life that was no longer his. Finally, desperation led him to a job he could get. A night shift stocking shelves at a cavernous big-box store. The work was anonymous, physically exhausting, and paid minimum wage. His manager was a kid half his age with a pierced eyebrow who called him Richie. Each night, under the stark, humming fluorescent lights, he would lift heavy boxes of detergent and canned goods, his former life as a powerful station manager, feeling like a distant, implausible dream. He who had once managed the complex ballet of 747s and international passengers was now defeated by a faulty price scanner. It was during a 3 a.m. break, sitting in the stark employee cafeteria on a sticky plastic chair, that he saw her. He was scrolling aimlessly through a news aggregator on his cheap, cracked smartphone when a headline caught his eye. Carbon Helix CEO Dr. Ivy Easton addresses UN on tech and social responsibility. There was a photo of her at a podium in Geneva, her expression radiating a calm, formidable intelligence. He felt a familiar surge of bitter resentment, but he clicked on it anyway, a moth drawn to the flame that had incinerated his life. The article summarized her speech, but it was a direct quote that stopped his heart. She had addressed the JFK incident not with anger, but with the precision of a surgeon. Bias is not a personal failing, but a systemic one. The article quoted her as saying, "The incident at the airport was not about one man's anger, but about a system that allows a person in a position of power to see a black woman as a threat by default. The challenge is not to punish individuals into oblivion, but to rebuild the systems and train the people within them to see humanity before category. Progress like the advanced materials we create requires us to break down old structures to build something stronger and more resilient." Reading those words was the true, final, and most devastating blow. It wasn't that she had won and he had lost. It was that she was playing an entirely different game, one whose rules he couldn't even begin to comprehend. He had been consumed by a petty desire to put her in her place, to win a small, meaningless battle at a boarding gate. She, in turn, had taken his ugly personal prejudice and analyzed it as a data point in a global systemic failure. She hadn't sought revenge. She had sought understanding on a scale he couldn't fathom. She had turned the mud he'd slung at her into a lens through which to view the world. He, Richard Covington, wasn't even the villain of her story. He was a footnote, a catalyst, an unfortunate, easily surpassed obstacle. He sat there under the humming lights, the smell of floor wax and stale coffee in the air, and felt the full crushing weight of his own insignificance. The karma wasn't just that he'd lost his job and his status. The karma was the soul-deep realization of who he had targeted, a giant whose world was so much larger than his own that his attack had barely registered as a distraction. Meanwhile, the ripples of that day spread outward, changing other lives for the better. Chloe Daniels had taken the video call from Eleanor Bishop from her tiny apartment, convinced she was about to be fired for insubordination. When Eleanor instead offered her the interim station manager position, praising her integrity, Chloe was left speechless. She accepted, and her first act as manager was to hold a staff meeting at Gate B32. She spoke of the incident not to place blame, but to establish a new standard of dignity first. Her team, weary of Richard's tyrannical style, responded with relief and loyalty. She was a leader, not a boss. Ben Carter, the tech developer, was inundated with messages after his video went viral. He received offers from news outlets, but it was the thousands of DMs from ordinary people sharing their own stories of harassment and injustice that truly moved him. He realized the power of his video wasn't just in exposing one man. It was in validating the experiences of countless others. That realization sparked an idea. He turned down the media jobs and used his savings to develop Witness, a simple, secure app that allowed users to timestamp and upload videos of injustice directly to legal aid societies and civil rights groups. His accidental act of courage evolved into an intentional instrument for change. Airvista Airlines, hemorrhaging money and prestige, did not just issue a press release. Under Eleanor Bishop's unflinching direction, they hired Dr. Easton's own consulting firm at a staggering fee to completely overhaul their corporate training. It was a humbling, expensive, and necessary act of penance. Months later, Dr. Easton found herself once again in JFK's Terminal 4. As she approached the Aerovista gate, the agent's eyes lit up with recognition. "Welcome back, Dr. Easton. It is an honor to have you fly with us." The new station manager, Chloe Daniels, came out from the office, a confident smile on her face, to personally thank her for her business and ensure her boarding was seamless. As Ivy walked down the jet bridge, she glanced back at the terminal. It was the same chaotic, beautiful river of humanity. But something had changed. A wrong had not just been righted. It had been used as a catalyst to build something better. A man's small, bitter world had collapsed, but in its place a space for growth, accountability, and dignity had been cleared. The echoes of that day were a testament to a hard but ultimately constructive karma. Richard Covington's story is a stark reminder that the abuse of power fueled by prejudice is a self-destructing bomb. In a world connected by technology, our actions are no longer isolated events. He tried to make one woman small, and in doing so, revealed his own insignificance to the entire world. Dr. Ivy Easton's story, however, shows us the true nature of strength. It isn't about shouting the loudest or wielding the most authority. It's about maintaining dignity in the face of indignity and using a moment of injustice not for revenge, but for progress. The airport lockdown was a literal and figurative clearing of the way for what truly mattered. This story serves as a powerful lesson for every corporation and every individual. What happened at JFK wasn't just drama. It was the inevitable consequence of a system and a mindset that is long overdue for an upgrade. What do you think was Richard Covington's fate deserved? What would you have done in this situation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true stories of justice and karma. Thank you for listening.